All right, this is our cabinet of extinct birds. These are Labrador ducks and heath hens, ivory-billed woodpeckers, Eskimo curlews, and then these are our specimens of passenger pigeon.
These are passenger pigeons, or rather, were passenger pigeons. About 130 years ago, New Yorkers would have spotted them all the time. Millions of passenger pigeons lived across the eastern United States. But today, you can only see specimens like these two in collections like the New York State Museum. In as little as a century, these birds went from being everywhere to nowhere. In today's Digging into New York, we're asking, what happened to the passenger pigeon? And have we learned anything from watching them disappear? So here we have gone forever.
Yeah, these are the birds that are gone forever from New York. These are species that are globally extinct. These species don't exist anywhere.
The passenger pigeon was one of the most abundant bird species in North America. So, how common were they?
People who saw these enormous flocks, including Alexander Wilson and John James Audubon, early naturalists, speculated that they must have been in the billions because the flocks were so extensive and so dense. And so they might have been one of the most numerous bird species in North America.
That was Dr. Jeremy Kirchman, curator of birds and mammals at the New York State Museum. We spoke with him at the Birds of New York exhibit to talk pigeon.
Their range extended as far west as the Rocky Mountains in North America. So they were just everywhere in North America east of the Rockies, about as far north as central Canada. Their core breeding range was centered on the Great Lakes. And so all of New York would have been within their major breeding range.
John James Audubon, a naturalist, artist, and namesake for the Audubon Society, one of the oldest nonprofits dedicated to preserving birds, described a passing flock near Henderson, Ohio in 1813. The air was literally filled with pigeons. The light of the noonday was obscured as by an eclipse, and the continued buzz of wings had a tendency to lull my senses to repose. Now, that's a lot of birds, but why the large flocks?
That kind of ecology where you have an enormous amount of individuals in one place at one time is sort of a strategy for evading predation because you can never satiate all the predators, right? So there's just so many of them that they sort of overwhelm the predators.
Well, most predators. Humans overwhelmed the pigeon population instead, making the birds victims of commercial hunting.
Well, their extinction is pretty well documented, and it's no mystery what led to their extinction. They were overexploited as a food product. They were overhunted for decades and decades.
Humans developed several techniques and technologies to hunt passenger pigeons and make pigeon hunting a professional industry.
People became known as pigeoners. It was basically a professional hunter. And so these people would be paid by the barrel to hunt enormous numbers of passenger pigeons and then sell them at markets. And with the development of telegraphs and railroads, you could target flocks. So a flock would show up in a place, the word would go out, all the professional hunters would come in. They'd kill thousands and thousands of passenger pigeons in a small amount of time.
All this large-scale hunting eventually caught up with us, and the pigeons declined in the second half of the 19th century. Soon, even the number of pigeons in captivity dwindled, and just a single female, named Martha, remained at the Cincinnati Zoo. She died in September 1914, the last of a once colossal species.
It was the extinction of the passenger pigeon that really led to all these wildlife conservation laws because they were such a spectacle. Everybody knew about them. They were never rare, and then suddenly they were all gone. And everybody knew why, too.
In 1918, the U.S. passed the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, a conservation law that prohibited the killing, capturing, and trading of over 1,000 protected bird species. President Teddy Roosevelt would also establish the nation's first wildlife refuges in the early 1900s to help protect species like herons and egrets, whose feathers were harvested for hats.
Once these laws were put into place, preventing the commercial exploitation of wild birds, a lot of these populations were able to recover. So it's notable that since the early 20th century, there's been very little bird extinction in North America because the laws have been so effective.
So, problem solved? Well, not quite. While these laws outlawed the intentional capturing and killing of these birds, new man-made threats emerged. Enter the spruce grouse. This funky little fowl lives in evergreen forests with pine and, well, spruce trees, their main source of food. They're very common in Canada, but in New York, can only be found here in the northern Adirondack Mountains. Here, the population is isolated, and thanks to human activity shrinking their habitat, it's also dwindling. If this continues, they could disappear from the state altogether, an ending we've seen before. To prevent this, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation started recovery efforts and worked with various experts, including Dr. Jeremy Kirchman, to find a solution.
This led to a research project that I was involved in where we were sequencing genes from Adirondack spruce grouse to determine their level of genetic diversity.
Dr. Kirchman and his team collected genetic samples of the Adirondack spruce grouse and compared the DNA with ones found in Canada, as well as these historic specimens found in the New York State Museum collections. They found that the birds had a very low level of genetic diversity, and that puts them at further risk.
And this work showed that they were very depauperate in terms of genetic diversity, possibly highly inbred, and vulnerable to extirpation.
To remedy this, the DEC began introducing spruce grouse from other healthy populations into the Adirondacks. So how is it going?
Early indications are that that is successful. The birds that they're bringing in are mating with the local birds and surviving. And so it's possible that with continued intervention and augmentation from other source populations, that our Adirondack population of spruce grouse could recover one day.
With continued managing from the DEC and ongoing research from the New York State Museum, there is a promising future for the spruce grouse of New York. From the New York State Office of Cultural Education, this has been Digging into New York. Thank you for watching.